that this team, I'm backed by a really incredible team, has accomplished in what feels like the shortest year, I'm sure, for a lot of people. And I, really credit that to this community. It's been amazing just to see how much the cannabis community and a lot of the industry players really care deeply about prioritizing restorative justice and social equity. So yeah, just so honored to be a part of this amazing team.
I'll just add Sarah as our executive director, Mary Bailey, our managing director, our dynamos run the day-to-day of the organization. And they're the ones that are the primary responsibility for all of our growth and initiatives so far. And they just kill it every day.
Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like Steve is here. We're going to call him in right now. Giacobbe. Hold on a second. Where is he? Actually, I don't see him in there, Sarah. Sarah, where's Steve at?
I have seen him in there, and now I don't.
Oh, he must be feverishly trying to get in.
I'm sure. I know we're so excited about it. Well, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Gordon. I'm the co-CEO of Kush.com. We're a business-to-business wholesale marketplace serving both the hemp and cannabis industry. So connecting buyers and sellers. And one of our biggest missions is sharing education, how to grow, where to grow, what's happening in the market, and how to build your business in this rapidly changing environment. Please visit Kush.com, sign up for an account. It's totally free. But one of the things that is really important to us, working in the recreational industry, we've got this incredible opportunity. We're here in Washington State. I'm calling in from Seattle. And we've got rec stores, down every single corner. It's creating jobs, it's creating tax revenue, and it's a part of our everyday life. But how did we get here? And it took a whole lot of work from people who were medical patients, people who were growing, and decades of activism, making sure that people have access to medicine. And I think that's easily overlooked because a lot of these people are in the prison system right now. And that's one of the things that we have to change. How are we in the prison system for something that is now legal? People are investing into, I can go and get a business license and grow cannabis in another state, yet somebody is being prosecuted for this currently. And I think that's one of the most important things. Perfect timing. We've got Steve here now. Good morning, Steve. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Steve DeAngelo. I am the founder of the Last Prisoner Project, and some people call me the father of the legal cannabis industry.
That's great. Well, I know this is a big passion project for you, Steve. What was your inspiration for starting the Last Prisoner Project?
So the genesis of the Last Prisoner Project was in 2017. It was after California voters had passed Prop 64, but before the law went into effect. And I, like a lot of cannabis executives, was going up to Toronto, Canada, in search of capital to finance our growth into this new market. And one afternoon, I found myself at the top floor of a very impressive skyscraper in the financial district of Toronto, sitting at a very long conference table with some of the most important people in the Canadian capital markets. And it was a good day. We'd all been looking at projections, at business plans, at financials, and laying some plans for a very big cannabis operation in California. And we were talking about tons and tons and tons of cannabis and millions and millions and millions of dollars. Towards the end of the day, my phone started buzzing. And I went out into the hall to take the call because I could see that it was from my friend Chuck, who was serving a 4-year sentence in Pennsylvania in a prison for conspiring to smuggle 14 pounds of cannabis worth less than $30,000 from California into Pennsylvania. And like all phone calls with a friend in prison, it was grim. It's just really sad to talk to your friend when they're in prison. And I walked back into the conference room feeling that sadness. But I walked into the room and everybody was really happy. Everybody was upbeat. We'd all been laying these great plans and nobody in that room was worried about getting arrested. Nobody was even had a thought of going to prison. And I was just struck by the disparity there, that on the one hand, my good friend Chuck was sitting in a cell, and on the other hand, here I was lucky enough to be at this conference table, both of us doing exactly the same thing. And I knew in that moment that for me, just so that I could look at myself in the mirror in the morning, that there was an imperative to do something to help Chuck and the thousands of others who are in the same situation he was in, and that was the genesis of the Last Prisoner Project.
Yeah, thank you. What an incredible story. I'm curious, what was that first conversation with your brother like? You recognize this just need in America and the opportunity to make change. Andrew, when Steve came to you with this idea, what was that like?
Well, it's important to fill in the story a little bit more and educate folks that helping people in prison is something that's been a part of our mission from as long as I can remember. My very first memory, one of my very first memories, cannabis memories, is visiting my brother when he was in prison, and I was 9 years old, and my brother was 18 or 19 at that time. And that was that was probably the event that activated me on this journey. So we've always been there for our people who've gotten locked up. And if somebody in our network got locked up, we made sure they got out of prison, and we made sure that they had a good legal defense. And when we opened Harborside, we had a program that people could write letters to prisoners, cannabis prisoners, and get free medicine in exchange for spending an hour writing a letter to a prisoner. So it's sort of in our DNA. So I was not surprised at all when Steve came to me with this latest idea. And as most of the ideas that Steve comes to me with, we're sharing some cannabis, and it's, right on, right on, right on. Yeah, let's do it. Who do we know that we can plug into this? Oh, well, Mary Bailey just called me the other day, and she's looking for, a new thing to sink her teeth into. And then it begins, and that's how many of our ideas begin, and this one was no different. So I was excited, and still am excited, to work on this. It's really great work we're all doing together here, and it feels really good to do this work. You don't really break a sweat because the mission is so meaningful that it's one of those jobs where you find yourself at the end of the day, and a whole day has passed, and you put in a full day of work, and you're ready to keep going.
Yeah, thank you so much for carrying that torch for all of us out here. We think about how we can participate, and you guys are laying a lot of the groundwork to make that happen. Sarah, can you tell us a bit more about what Last Prisoner Project does, and how can people become involved in your project?
Yeah, so at LPP, we really use a multifaceted approach to redressing unjust cannabis laws and the consequences of those laws on the people that have been impacted. We do that through intervention and direct services, as well as policy work, legislative advocacy, and awareness campaigns. Something that's deeply important to us is getting the public, and particularly the cannabis industry and the cannabis community, simply to recognize that this is a problem. I find so often that individuals within this community don't realize that we are still arresting people, we're still sentencing people to lengthy incarceration sentences for nonviolent cannabis offenses. And right now we have over 40,000 individuals just in the United States still incarcerated on cannabis crimes. And many of our constituents are incarcerated for life sentences. So a big part of the work we do obviously is around release, matching those constituents with pro bono attorneys, doing the legal work to actually get them out of imprisonment. But we really want to follow that work up. At Last Prisoner Project, we believe in getting full freedom for our constituents. So what that means is that we also want to ensure that when our constituents are coming out of incarceration, we are removing those barriers to re-entering society, ensuring they have a clear record, giving them access to employment, housing, assistance that they might need, we really want to make sure that we're providing those resources and that support, because unfortunately, as we know, in this country particularly, we simply don't support individuals coming out of incarceration. We actually set up a lot of barriers for people to rebuild their lives post-incarceration. So that's part of what we do at LPP, is that reentry work. And something that we do that is really unique is actually creating pathways to employment within this new legal industry for those that have carried that torch through prohibition, who have that expertise and that knowledge of this plant, but that have suffered greatly for it, and creating that space for them in this new industry.
So I've got two questions here. You know, one, a lot of us know somebody who's been impacted from cannabis, you know, being caught by the police and then thrown into prison. How does someone connect with your organization to provide assistance and support for those individuals?
Yeah, so if you go on our website, there are a couple different links. Right now, we are activating a compassionate release program around the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, because of the pandemic, our incarcerated community is at a particular risk. It's a really urgent and dire risk for anyone that's incarcerated right now. So if you know someone who's incarcerated on a cannabis offense, who might be eligible for that program, you can go on our website. There's a button that you can click to get help, and fill out some information, and we'll contact you to try to match that individual with an attorney. We also have ways that folks can get involved through, again, our reentry programs. We have a lot of scholarship opportunities, a lot of courses that people can take if they are interested in getting involved in the industry. That's all on our website as well. And if you're interested in getting more involved, there's actually a page, it's called Get Involved, and it has kind of all of our different volunteer opportunities, ways that you can get involved in your local community or your state with policy reform or advocacy. So definitely check out our website. That's lastprisonerproject.org for all of those opportunities.
Wonderful. And I'm going to share a couple of those links into the general chat as well. I know that you're also working on a change.org petition. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so again, this is surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. As I mentioned, the conditions of confinement make it incredibly dangerous for anyone that is incarcerated. And the number one way that we can mitigate that danger for our incarcerated communities is to decarcerate, to get people out of jails and prisons right now. Overcrowding, mass incarceration, these are the things that make being in confinement right now particularly dangerous and make our constituents particularly susceptible to this type of virus. So again, on our website, we have this COVID relief page, and we've got a petition that is targeted at the federal government, so the Attorney General and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and urging them to take steps to decarcerate, particularly our constituents who are incarcerated for nonviolent cannabis offenses, as well as really any incarcerated person who is particularly at risk of dying due to COVID. And beyond actually releasing people, which again is the number one way we can mitigate the spread of this virus, we want our facilities to also be taking very basic steps to protect these communities, ensuring that our incarcerated communities have access to masks, basic hygiene products, that they're putting in those procedures in place that every other, business and service around the world right now are putting in place to try to mitigate the spread of the virus. So that's what we're doing on the federal level. On your state and local level, on that same page on our website, you can find out actually what's going on in your state. What have your local and state officials done in response to this pandemic? Are they releasing people? Are they providing those resources, those supplies? And then based on what's going on in your community, we're urging people to make calls to the governor's office, to the Department of Corrections in their state, and again, ensure that we're at least taking those basic steps to protect these communities.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone who's out there, if you look on the bottom of your screen in the chat, we just shared the change.org petition. We would all really appreciate it if you spend a couple minutes there, filled it out, and help support the mission here. Steve, I'm curious, with COVID happening, how has this changed your guys' strategy? I feel like things are so much more important to happen now because of the danger there is in the prison system. What is Last Prisoner Project and your efforts? What are you guys focusing on now?
Well, you're absolutely right about the urgency. What used to be just a matter of simple restorative justice has become a matter of life and death. I mean, can you imagine being in a prison with no control over who you are next to or how close they are to you or the water that you drink or the air that you breathe or the food that you eat? With no sanitizer, with no masks, maybe with no toilet paper because the guards have purloined all of it, knowing that the virus is in that prison and getting closer to you every single time a guard walks past your cell. It's just horrifying, and so that horror, that sense of horror, sits with us very urgently, and so we have pivoted from our clemency program. We had a program which really sought to persuade the governors of legal cannabis states to use their existing clemency power to pardon thousands and thousands of prisoners. We're now still working to get prisoners released, but we're focusing on compassionate release, trying to get as many of our constituents as we can out of prisons, out of jails before this matter of injustice turns into a death sentence. Sarah can talk to you a little bit more about what that means on the technical level. But in addition to just trying to get people out as quickly as we can, we've been helping to organize the delivery of hand sanitizer, masks, and other personal protective equipment into the prisons because the prison systems themselves, for the most part, are not supplying those urgently needed items.
And the prisons are the highest infection rates in the world right now, I believe, are in the United States prisons. So this is, and our constituents are dying. We lost one this week. So and in some cases you have prisoners that are actually manufacturing some of this protective equipment and then can't access that same equipment themselves. So the situation in the prisons is really, really horrendous, even before COVID, and with COVID, it's beyond horrendous. And hopefully the politics of COVID, one of the things we're seeing in the politics of COVID is things happen fast, things that perhaps were more quote unquote impossible beforehand are suddenly a little bit more possible. And can we use that to help our constituents? And can we use that political momentum and urgency to help? So that's part of why we're making that pivot now.
Absolutely. Something really promising. I love you guys out there who are watching this now and participating. We've actually got some calls for help. Someone asked, Elizabeth asked, what do you recommend for a new lawyer to get hired or involved in the type of work that Last Prisoner Project does? How does someone help who's on the legal side?
Yeah, again, if you go to our website, lastprisonerproject.org/get-involved, get-involved. But if you go to our website, poke around, there's a form you can fill out to volunteer. And if you are an attorney who's willing to dedicate some time to these efforts, we will work with you on. Right now, we're hyper focused on this compassionate relief effort around COVID. But we need as many attorneys licensed in as many jurisdictions as we can to get folks out. When you go through the compassionate release process, you go back to the court that sentenced you. And so we are always in need of attorneys all over the country because we are doing this work on both the state and federal level. But again, on the federal level, we have cases that we're taking. I've got one in Maine, one in Wyoming, one in Missouri. And so just even finding attorneys simply to be the attorney of record is critical. And that's really not, too much of a lift for an attorney. But if you're involved, you want to get more involved in this work and understanding how to do, I think it's beyond criminal defense work, working on things like clemency. Really what you're doing is structuring a narrative of why someone deserves relief. And a lot of the work that we do involves kind of the policy reasons. And I think anyone that feels passionate about this work can understand kind of exactly what we've articulated during this talk, which is at the same time that a lot of these states are building a robust industry, making billions of dollars off of legal cannabis, others are languishing in prison. And so that's the kind of thinking, the kind of framework that we want our attorneys to use. And so if that speaks to you, definitely go to our website, fill out our volunteer form, and we will be in touch.
It makes a huge difference to be able to create hope for these folks who are in the prison system. I think that's one of the most important things we can do is be that beacon of hope at this time. I do have, another question. What are some of the success stories that you guys have been seeing from your work? You know, you're getting people out of prison, getting reintegrated. What stands out to you?
Well, one example of a prisoner that we've assisted in their reentry. Of course, we're still, for the most part, working on getting people released, but cannabis prisoners who have served their sentences are already getting out, and so we've been assisting them. One of the people that we've helped is Evelyn La Chappelle. Evelyn had this really horrifying story. She was a college student in her last year of school, allowed a friend of hers to use her bank account to put some proceeds from cannabis sales. And 4 years later, almost 4 years later, Evelyn was arrested on interstate conspiracy charges and ultimately sentenced to 7 years in prison. She served over 5 years. And when she got out, she was lucky enough to be able to get a really good job in her field, the field that she was in before she got arrested, which was hospitality here in Oakland at one of the most well-known hotels in the city. And all was going well for her until a coworker Googled her, found out about her criminal history, reported her to HR, and the HR department, for no other reason, terminated Evelyn immediately. So we activated some of our networks, and Evelyn activated herself, and we are able to help her find a job in the industry. So she now works for Vertosa, which is an extract company here in Oakland, and so she works in the offices there, focusing on community engagement, which is very closely related to her field that she's been trained in. So Evelyn is one of the success stories that we can point to so far.
And it's complicated, right? Because Evelyn's still under probation. So she had to work in a part of the company that didn't touch the plant. And so there are complexities with each case that LPP has to manage, and a lot of needles that need to be thread with each individual case. And that's why it takes so much time and energy for each case. And that's why we need all the help we can get.
And how many cases? Go ahead.
We also had a really remarkable breakthrough in the case of Michael Thompson, who is in his 27th year of a 60-year sentence for selling 3 pounds of weed to an undercover cop in the 1990s. And we had earlier engaged the prosecutor who had originally been, the prosecutor's office who had originally been involved in Michael's case, trying to get them to endorse his release. And they refused at that time. But over the course of 2 or 3 months, we had a very intense campaign to get public comments and messages into the prosecutor's office, with the result that just, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but about a week or 10 days ago, the prosecutor's office signed on and called on the governor to release Michael. We're still working on that case. He's still in prison, but getting the prosecutor to sign on and endorse his release was a major victory. And it's a victory that was only made possible because of hundreds, thousands of people heard this call and responded to it.
One of the questions that we have from the audience, is how many cases are you guys managing at a single time?
So our strategy to date has been on really robust reform. So with our clemency project, we weren't taking on cases on the individual level. We were working on the state level and with the White House to implement broader clemency programs so that anyone who met a set of criteria that we would work through with those executive offices would be released. So essentially anyone whose primary offense is a cannabis offense who had no other violent crimes on their record would be released from incarceration. The point of that, of course, was to put all these resources into something that would go beyond a case-by-case basis and really create systemic reform. All that to say, that's obviously a program that takes time. And it's definitely still a program that we're actively working on that I think will pick up a lot more with those executive offices post-pandemic. But as Steve mentioned, because of the urgency of COVID, but also the opportunity that we're seeing both on a state and federal level to release individuals because of the urgent risk that COVID poses, we have started taking on those case-by-case basis through our compassionate release program. And right now we have about 30 cases that we're managing through that. And again, if you know someone who would be eligible to participate, might find relief from that program, you can go on our website and fill out the intake form to get matched with a pro bono attorney if you know someone who's incarcerated on a cannabis offense and at risk because of the pandemic.
And we have a lot of folks who are, asking, how do we become more involved? I'd like to donate my time. We know we can go to lastprisonerproject.org/get involved to register there. What does that next step look like for them? What kind of help do you guys need to promote Last Prisoner Project?
Well, our mission is a really big mission to release every single cannabis prisoner on planet Earth. And getting prisoners of any type ever released once they've been sentenced is a big, big lift. So we have a huge job in front of us, and our approach is to find a way for anybody to be able to plug in and help us do what we do. And so the Get Involved page really reflects that kind of commitment. And depending on what your skill set is, what your experience is, how much time you have to dedicate to it, you can plug in as easily as joining our letter writing program and just writing some letters to prisoners. Those letters mean a huge amount to prisoners. Another way that people can help if they don't have much bandwidth is to help me, Sarah. I just lost my train of thought there.
Well, something that I wanted to touch on actually when you were referencing Michael Thompson's case is kind of the power of this kind of advocacy campaign. I think, personally, sometimes I've experienced doing that work of making calls to your elected officials, writing letters, and just feeling like you're not seeing any movement. Steve really clearly articulated the exact seeing the fruits of that labor in Michael's case. And across the board, when you're talking about executive clemency, and even to a certain extent, compassionate release on the judge level, those officials are moved by public perception and by what they think their constituents believe and what they think their constituents feel is right and just. And so your elected officials, your governors need to know that you believe that nonviolent cannabis offenders should be released from incarceration. For these officials, it is a political move to release someone. So they need to know that they have the support of their constituents to do that. And I think, as Steve said, we really saw that in Michael's case. We activated a huge network of our supporters to make calls to the prosecutor's office And when we originally engaged on that case, the prosecutor really didn't want to get involved, was not looking like he was going to support Michael's clemency petition. But because of that activation, he came on board to support it. And so now we need to re-engage that network to get him out, to make those calls to the parole board and the governor's office. And again, that's something that works across the board for this type of clemency advocacy to those executive offices, just signaling to them through your letters, your calls, that you support this work, that you support releasing our cannabis prisoners. It's so critical, and it's something that I think we have made very simple on our website. Again, we give you a script that you can use when you're making those calls. We give you the phone numbers to call. So if you've got a cell phone, if you've got access to a computer, you can get involved and you can really make direct change happen.
Yeah, don't believe the lie that those phone calls and letters don't make a difference. We're so cynical about our politics, and a lot of times we don't have enough trust in our politics, but it really does make a difference. And those letters to the prosecutor in Thompson's case really moved the needle. And there was a whole lot of more letters from people who feel like we do that Michael should be released than there were people who felt like he should stay in there. And that makes a huge difference when you're an elected official or a public servant, that's what you listen to. Me and my brother, and Sarah, we've been in rooms with these elected officials. We've been engaged in public policy. We know what makes them tick. So don't believe that lie. Pick up the phone, write a letter. It does make a big difference. It doesn't take a lot of time. And if you're moved by this webinar and you want to get involved, that's a great way to do it. And you'll immediately get a return on your investment emotionally and spiritually. You will feel it. As soon as you put the phone down from calling a prosecutor or a parole board or a governor's office, you'll feel it. You'll feel that, wow, I made a difference. I helped Michael, or I helped another prisoner. If being public like that doesn't feel comfortable to you, write a prisoner directly. That also has huge emotional payoff when you get a letter from a prisoner and that prisoner has engaged you and thanked you and illuminated how much your words meant to them and how it gave them hope to exist another day through their incarceration. It really makes a big difference. So those are two things that everybody can do. And if you're moved by this, those are two simple ways to plug in.
Now, Andrew,
if you have more bandwidth, have a little bit more time, let us know what you do. This is a huge mission. And so, we have folks who are marketers who have been helping us with our marketing campaigns. We have folks who are software experts who have been helping us put together all of the software that we need to run our operations. We have publicists who have volunteered their efforts helping us publicize, artists who have helped us develop some of our merchandise. So if you have a skill, let us know what that skill is, and we'll find a way to put it to work.
That's great. So, I want to write a letter in and make some change here. In talking with politicians, Andrew, what do you find resonates the most with them? If we want to make change, how do we share that message with them in a way that they will most likely receive it?
Tell a personal story about a prisoner like Michael Thompson and say 26, 27 years for 3 pounds of weed, and the dispensary in your district sells more than that in half a day. And Michael Thompson is in jail for the rest of his life, and we need to change that. So the personal stories of prisoners, which you can learn about on our website, is really the most powerful way to move people. Am I frozen? Everyone's frozen except me. Michael, you're frozen. Oh, there you go.
We're still good.
All right, cool. Yeah, I think the personal stories, connecting people to the personal stories of the prisoners, that's certainly something we try to do in our messaging. We need to do more of it. And, when we get people out, the world will hear about that as well. And I think that's the most powerful way. When people are moved in their heart, it's how we legalized medical cannabis. It's how we've always made change with kids with epilepsy, same thing. And it's the same with the prisoners. We have to move people in their heart, and then they're motivated to change the policy.
Yeah, and I can see the passion out there. Chris Garcia, free Luke, free Craig, free Lance. Write some letters for those guys. It really can make a big difference. And I know that love hearing from you, knowing that you have support on the outside as well. We had a question here. We're seeing policy reform in some cities, talking about expunging records from folks who are convicted of cannabis, nonviolent offenders being released. Have you seen much traction from that? Because I feel like you hear the news article come out, and there's a lot of excitement. You say, hey, there's progress. But I haven't heard anything about it since. Are these changes actually happening?
Yeah, so particularly around expungement and clean slate initiatives, this is an area where we've seen a huge uptick in the past few years, particularly around marijuana offenses. And I use expungement and clean slate very often as an example of exactly why drug policy and cannabis policy can lead to really broad reform. It was through legalization that things like automatic expungement started to become more and more mainstream. But I think it's also important to recognize the distinction, which even for myself as an attorney, I get very caught up in the nomenclature. It's different jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But when we talk about expungement and clean slate, we're talking about that post-release relief. So once someone's been let out of incarceration, clearing their record, again, ensuring that we're removing those barriers to re-entering society. What expungement doesn't do is it doesn't provide retroactive relief for those still incarcerated. So that's kind of the gap that Last Prisoner Project recognized in criminal justice reform efforts around cannabis that needed to be filled. No one was really working on actually releasing those who are still incarcerated on the kind of broader systemic level that LPP is engaged in. And again, I think COVID is just an incredibly interesting time. And as we pointed out, this pandemic has really highlighted a lot of systemic inequities across our society, and mass incarceration is certainly one of the biggest. So we are seeing traction in terms of decarceration efforts because of the pandemic, because our communities and thus our elected officials are recognizing just how dangerous and how ill-equipped our detention centers, our jails, and our prisons are to handle this type of pandemic and to really deal with any kind of health issue for those who are incarcerated. So we've started to see broader releases in terms of short-term facilities. So again, detention centers, jails. Jails have, in a lot of states like California, significantly reduced their populations. Unfortunately, on the prison level, we're not seeing as much traction, and that's where LPP is really deeply engaged. We have been involved in a lot of collaborative advocacy efforts on the state level. Some states where we had those signs of early success, Colorado, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, where the governor or the DOC or parole board issued an executive order allowing the parole board or DOC to broaden the qualifications for who was being released. And we thought that that would lead to, thousands of individuals getting released. In each state, we have tens of thousands of people incarcerated. Unfortunately, to date, the numbers we're seeing are more in the 50s, max 100 people. That's simply not going to be effective to deal with the scale of this pandemic and to deal with the fact that our prison system is so overcrowded. We have 2.3 million people incarcerated currently in the US. So we really need broader decarceration efforts to make a dent in what is really an urgent crisis in our detention facilities right now.
Yeah, and for your listeners who may not know, the prison bureaucracy is the most onerous, slow, absurd, duplicitous bureaucracy, and most adverse to change of any bureaucracy I've ever encountered, and certainly slow to release people. Even if you make the best of arguments, there's just this institutional inertia that you have to just fight through, you know, and it takes a lot of effort to do it. So it's a bummer that some of those broad measures that we expected would lead to thousands of people being released have only resulted in a few dozen being released, because the crisis is massive, COVID-19 in the prisons, and it's just not good enough. It just is not acceptable.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate the dedication and resiliency you guys have. You know, we want to see everybody to get out and have that opportunity. The important thing is that the snowball has been pushed down the hill. The momentum has started. You guys have spearheaded this incredible effort, and we're all here today talking about how we support. You know, I'm so encouraged by everyone who's listening to us today and saying, how can we help? That's incredible. All your skills and talents can be put to use. We need this investment, and LPP is a great guiding light for your efforts. Guys, I also know that you work with brands to help spread your mission. How does a brand and a business become involved with LPP?
We have a couple of different programs depending on where a company is in the cannabis industry. Our Partners for Freedom program is aimed at manufacturer, and anybody who's manufacturing cannabis products who has a brand out in the market can participate in our program in return for a commitment of steady and sustained support of Last Prisoner Project. The manufacturers gain the ability to put our logo on their packages so that consumers will know that this is a company that's actually helping take care of the cannabis community and gives them the opportunity to vote with their dollars. So that's really aimed at the products. We also have a program called Roll It Up for Freedom. And this is really aimed at the retail consumers, and we ask retailers to ask cannabis consumers to round up their purchase to the next dollar and donate that change to the Last Prisoner Project. That's a program that we are just beginning to roll out now, and we need help from anybody who is a cannabis consumer or anybody as a cannabis retailer. If you're a retailer, please get in touch with us, and so we can get you signed up for the program. And if you're a consumer, go to whoever it is that you're buying your cannabis from and ask them, urge them to join the Roll It Up for Freedom program. So those are two of the ways that cannabis companies, retailers, and manufacturers can participate in this effort.
Wonderful. And we're coming towards the close of our session here. We've learned a huge amount. Thank you so much for sharing your stories of success with us and your efforts given COVID. We've got our next session coming up with the group on Wednesday, June 17th. We hope we see you there. We're hoping to have Evelyn come on, someone who's been through the Last Prisoner Project, one of the beneficiaries, and share her story. Do you guys have any other closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
Yeah, look, you know, what I like to say is that you know, we have a real opportunity here. I was talking earlier about the genesis of this mission, and it was at the top of that skyscraper at that long conference table. And what I saw in that moment was not just the moral obligation that the legal industry has to stand up for people who are still incarcerated, but also the opportunity. We are building a vast industry, and it's going to be, it's already taking in billions and billions of dollars. If we can just siphon off 1 or 2%, a very small amount of those resources and those energies to get this job done, it's something that can actually happen, and it will happen. So to anybody who is listening, this is a job that needs you, and please get in touch with us. It's something that we can actually get done if we all pull together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us here today. This is an important mission. We're dedicated to it through and through. Kush.com, we support you guys over there at Last Prisoner Project. I appreciate the opportunity to work with you and continue to spread this mission. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to write my letter in, work with you guys, and figure out how we can become more involved. So Steve, Sarah, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to chatting again in a month, and let's see what we can get done in the next 30 days.
All right.
Thank you, Michael.
All right. Thanks for everyone for tuning in today.
Be well.
Bye.